Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I am Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and Deb Romero joins me once again, certified Alexander Technique instructor. So today's topic, I thought we would continue a little bit from the last podcast, where we talked about rein contact more than anything else. But this podcast, I think I'm going to title Control and Support, because that ties directly into rein use as a rider. And a lot of times we don't know the difference between controlling and supporting. And I would say the number one excuse used with sort of where it's no longer a rein contact, it'll turn into a constant rein aid to either prevent the horse from falling forward or pick the horse up, quote
Pick
unquote,
the horse up.
right? And that's really can become a constant rein aid. It's a constant amount of force that the horse ends up balancing on, like we talked about before. We become the walker for the horse to just
Right.
lean on their front end. And so understanding like the main reason I hear a lot of riders doing that is that they have to support their horse and not just let their horse fall on the forehand. And there's
That
some
just fascinates me.
what fascinates you about that?
How mm, how you think you could possibly support with tension? Because if you're supporting the horse through your hands, you're contracting. So that therefore you become an aid. You become static and not movable.
Yeah. And this is where we get into the weeds, which is what I
Yeah, we
love because so many of these sort of like
do.
little quips and euphemisms in riding can be partially true. They're not entirely
Right.
false, but that doesn't mean that they're really guiding us into a better and better coordination as a rider or better communicators with our horses. So I love to get into the details of what does this mean? What
The
does
geekiness.
yeah, the geekiness, because
Get
I
the
go,
geeky.
at the end of the day, what we feel is the language. Like that's where the rubber meets the road. It's not a concept. It's an actual experience of force and feel and an exchange of information that has no words.
And like I said before, it's if we're tensing anywhere, if we're gripping with our legs or doing a constant aid with our hands, there's no way that we can hear anything or feel anything. We've already shut down communication
Right. So
through
there's
our
no
body.
way if we are fearful, if we're unstable, or
Mm-hmm.
if we've learned to stabilize through our limbs, our arms
Right.
or our legs, bracing in the stirrup, clamping with the legs, there's no way that we can actually hear all the detail in the changes of force that are offered by our horse as balance comes and goes or self-carriage comes and goes. So understanding what a rein contact is, I think the first thing we talked about in the last podcast was the rider's stability has to be the seat, the pelvis, up the spine, right into the head balance.
Yes. And
So,
it's pretty much Alexander work that needs to happen. And I've just experimented with a rider that I wanted her to have 10 Alexander lessons off the horse so that she had some level of understanding before she took it to the horse, because the horse is a huge stimulus.
absolutely. And I'm doing that more and more, not quite as accurately as you do it as a professional. But what I've been playing with is working with riders off the horse, experimenting and
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel different functions of our own spine off the horse, kind of
Right.
bringing up, Is your left bend as easy as your right bend? Do you feel more restricted this direction or that direction? Can we equalize it? And can you start to consciously control the function of your own spine? Because once we get on a horse, we have two big challenges. One is the forces of motion that are going to be under the horse's control or not, and the distraction factor. Every time we think
Huge.
about the horse, we lose conscious awareness of our own body. So yeah, as I'm
Yeah.
working on the rider balance information, the workbook and podcasts and all that, which will be coming up, a huge segment of that rider balance workbook is what we can do on the ground to explore and improve our own use that maybe has nothing to
Mhm.
do with the horse,
Right.
which is huge.
It's
And
huge. It's a huge awareness, and it's very difficult, even as an Alexander teacher, to have that conversation back and forth. And do I need to pay attention to me? What about the horse? So it's this constant. I don't know how anybody can think about anything else when they're riding.
I know it makes arena work a whole lot more
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
I'm sure my neighbors think I'm crazy the way they see me riding in the pasture at the walk.
yeah,
What is she doing?
yeah. No, and I had a new student at a clinic who had watched a couple of lessons and thought, what are these ladies doing?
What are
Like
they doing?
it looks so slow. It looks easy. Most of them are walking, maybe a little bit of trot. But they look really concentrated. And then one of them took a lesson and we worked with her body on the back of a horse. And she doesn't own a horse, so she just wanted to work on her
Oh,
own balance and use as a rider. And we just made a couple of simple changes and she was overwhelmed.
yeah,
I
it's
go, it is,
overwhelming.
yeah, to change our own use can be pretty overwhelming. And even what we talked about last time, developing a rein contact using numbers and adjusting your rein length to keep the same feel. I go, that's pretty mind blowing for a lot of riders. And suddenly having to find more stability through the saddle to actually be able to be adaptable with the reins, bouncing between a contact and an aid as
I
needed.
think that's a huge word, adaptability.
Yeah,
Having
humans aren't,
riders being adaptable is the name of the game.
yeah. And that actually brings sort of to this podcast topic. It has a lot to do with reins, but one of my students reminded me that I said, and I went, hey, that's pretty good, um, that you can't learn to give a horse support as long as you think you need control. So you have to give up,
Huge. Bam.
bam, you have to give up control over a horse in order to learn how to support a horse. Those are very different things, and
Right.
especially when it comes to the reins.
I love it when I hear I'm going to put the horse into self carriage.
How's that
So,
working for you? Yeah. Just like you're gonna,
so contradictory.
yeah. You can't even put yourself in
No.
self-carriage. Do you know what I mean? You have to explore it. We have to discover it. We can't put ourselves there,
Right.
right? And so that differentiation between control and support, because
Hmm.
everything you're describing with how if we're balancing on our limbs, if we're tight, especially through our hands and arms, that tension that disallows any receptivity in our body of feel always goes hand in hand with either a need to control because we're afraid or a need to control because we think that's what we're supposed to do,
Yeah, and we
right?
might not even know what's going on. It might totally be a subconscious central nervous system trigger. It's the
Yeah.
same for the horses. If they're in extension or out of balance, it's going to go to the central nervous system and flash an alert.
Yeah.
Hey, you're not stable. Grip somewhere.
Yes. Yes. So
And there's the control factor. Yeah.
all of the dysfunctions that we all live with in our own bodies or all of what we call the problems, the laundry list of things our horse can't do well, All
Mhm.
of those dysfunctional uses of the body are primarily because the body is losing self-control,
Exactly.
right? So self-carriage and self-control to me are interchangeable. So
Mhm.
if we're the ones controlling the other, we're never going to get, we can't give support because we're controlling. So
Right,
if
because
we,
we're not allowing another participant.
right, because support is, well, even if we go back to our walker example, and I double checked, my dad's walker has four wheels, right? And a
Yay!
handbrake and a little seat, and it's sort of the
He's
modern
he's
version of the
driving.
walker.
He's not a walker, he's driving.
Yeah, so he's not strong enough to go on his walk outside in the neighborhood without his walker, right? He can get fatigued pretty easily as he's rebuilding his strength. So he takes the walker, but he pushes it. So he pushes the walker, and then if he gets tired, he can either lean on it and rest, or there's a little seat he can sit down and
Oh, that's
rest.
cool.
I know. It's like an instant chair walker combination. This thing is awesome.
That is really cool.
But it has four wheels, but it's very stable. And if you hold the handbrake, it's immobile. So it can be completely immobile or mobile. You can sit, you can push it, you can lean on it and walk. It has all of these different features. And it kind of reminded me when his physical therapist was saying, take the walker because you still have a safety issue. You have a
Right,
fatigue issue as you're
right.
rebuilding your balance and strength, but push the walker as long as you can. And it made me think of when I'm doing that exercise of keeping the same feel on different rein lengths, what happens is it's like pushing the walker. We're no longer controlling the use of the front legs, neck, and head. We're trying to just touch it. However, it's moving, we're just creating a connection or a touch. That to me is a contact. As soon as we're doing more than touching or the feeling of sort of pushing the reins out in front of us, if we're pulling the reins towards us or we're trying to manipulate the use of the head, the neck, or the front legs with the reins, now we're in the land of aids. We're
Hmm.
talking and no longer listening. Nothing wrong with that. But if we don't know the difference, then we're more often in the mode of control than we are in support. So if we
And
think
who
take,
wants to be around a person that's constantly in control
I don't think any of us like it very much. Yeah.
or telling us what to do? Do it
Yes.
this way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And even if the horse cooperates because of leverage or fear or whatever, it doesn't mean they like it either.
Good point.
So then I get comments like, my horse hates arena work. My horse hates the bit. My horse hates, um, my horse is bored. My horse, all of
Wow.
these kind of comments. And I go, really, if we're communicating our physical use and feeling and receiving the horse's physical use, and we're altering that physical use together, I go, there's nothing boring about dancing. Like dancing with a partner, even
Yeah.
if you're in an arena, is super interesting because there's a constant back and forth communication and
It's a conversation.
experimenting. Yeah,
It's a conversation, not do it this way or we're not going to do it at all.
right. And if our concept is we pick up the reins, we have one rein contact, one rein length, and our horse
Mhm.
has to acquiesce. Now we do circles, diagonals, big circles, little circles. Now we
20
change,
meter circles.
right, 20-meter circles,
I never could get that
diagonals,
right.
leg yields, shoulder in. If we're going through sort of these schooling maneuvers, that gets boring really fast. Absolutely. I mean, when I was growing up, it's like, okay, let's hurry up and do our walk, trot, canter around the rail so I can jump.
Yeah,
Like, let's get to the
I
fun part.
remember those days.
Yeah. But if we're actually working on communication and internal coordination, which is improving balance, all of a sudden the walk, trot, canter gets super interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we're just controlling, it's like we're not, the conversation is just one way. which is kind of boring.
Mhm. It's like we're all the controller's always talking.
Yeah. And I kind of
And the
imagine the horse hears us like wah, 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 blah, 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 blah. This person never shuts up. Are we done yet? Because they're not feeling heard and there's no reciprocation of understanding or communication.
right,
So we have to be in that rein contact, seat contact, leg contact, which is a receiving mode of what do we feel? What are we receiving from the horse's movement in our seat, our legs, and our reins through our hands? And then how we respond is the aid. How we
yeah,
alter. And if you think of it, the language is just as specific as if we were speaking like we are today in English or maybe French or German. We are using specific words to communicate specific ideas.
right,
And that's what the language of feel does. So like we talked about in the rain contact episode, what we're calling a 5 in the amount of tension or force we feel through the reins is a different word than a 4 or a 3 or a 2 or a 0, a disconnect, right? Or a 10, right? All of those are different words within the vocabulary. And we could even assign those same numbers to the feel of our seat in the saddle, our upper legs against the saddle, our lower
yeah, we
legs
could.
against the saddle. How much pressure are we increasing in our leg aids, right? Or are we moving our seat or are we quietly receptive with our seat?
Right.
Because every single change of muscle tone in our body is a word.
Yes, it is.
So the more we're wiggling around, moving, thinking that the harder and bigger our leg aids are, or we're driving with the seat, or we're holding those reins for everything we're worth, we're just shouting information constantly at the horse and never able to receive information.
And sometimes we even get feedback from that.
Yeah. My horse is so bad, so
Yeah.
naughty.
We take it too personally.
Yeah. I go,
Yeah.
Maybe they're just trying to communicate something.
They're trying to tell you something.
This is working for me. This is not working for me." So support, because this is where the half truth comes in. If we don't offer any kind of resistance to the imbalance of a horse,
Mm,
then we don't offer any support. So it's like, okay, Dad, go take a walk without your walker. Good luck. You have no support. Hopefully you don't fall. Hopefully you're strong enough to do this. Hopefully you don't have an accident or an injury. That would be unsafe. That would be irresponsible, right? So this,
it's kind of like the thought that my work is a therapy, but it's not. It is actually a teaching of guiding, suggesting this. Could you try it this way?
that's how I would define support.
Yeah.
So support is not saying this is what you're going to do,
And this is how we're going to do it.
right? So in the horse industry, okay, if the horse is really acting like an orangutan and running you over on the ground, in that moment, you need control. You need to
Right.
say, don't run me
Safety.
over, right? You need to get away from my body because this is not safe, right? So is that control or is that support? It could be both,
Right.
right? So there are times where there's a safety issue and we need a little bit of control either to help our horse stay safe or to keep us safe or both.
Hmm.
Okay, that to me is where control begins and ends in my relationship with a horse.
Hmm.
Just like if I were walking along a cliff with a friend and they're going to fall off, I'm not going to be polite in how I grab them from falling off the cliff. I'm
Right.
not going to be polite when that little kid starts running into the street. right? I'm going to control that situation because a little kid who doesn't know better than to run into the street might get hit by a car.
Right.
So yes, I'm supporting the safety, but I'm also having to control the situation.
And
So
that's being a good leader.
exactly. And knowing the difference, that to me
Right.
is where the benefit of control ends. So if my horse is calm and focused and I feel safe to ride my horse, I should be out of that baby training part of controlling, right? I no longer should need to control my horse. Now I have to learn how to support my horse. And I think your definition of support is fantastic. Support allows room for the other to go through a process of trial and error,
Yeah.
making mistakes, exploring, figuring out what feels right, what doesn't feel right. And we're giving information, verbally or non-verbally. When a rider gives resistance with the reins or the seat or the leg, that's basically it can support the horse by saying, no, let's not do that. I don't think that's going to be useful to our end goal. And if the horse blows through the aid, they go, well, I think it is, right? It's not the end of the world. It's just what they think.
And yeah, and they're voicing their opinion in the way they know.
Yeah. And if we're
Yeah.
genuinely offering support, because a horse blowing through our aids is where the rider suddenly gets triggered into
Mhm.
needing control. And I go, not necessarily. Like I love what I call a supported passenger ride. So
I do too.
in a supported passenger ride, I can have a leg contact. We never question our seat contact. We're always in contact with our seat, right? So I can have a leg contact, a seat contact, and even that flexible rein contact where I'm keeping the same number on a variety of rein lengths. But I don't have to tell the horse where to go, and I don't have to influence what speed the horse chooses to move at.
Right.
And I go, that's giving up control and offering support. Now, if the horse gets carried away and starts bolting, okay, maybe I need to take control for a second for
Right.
safety reasons. But then I could go back to learning support by giving up control over certain elements. So, like
And it's
learning,
kind of like if you're in that thought of control and contraction, you're not going to know what could happen before something happens. You know what I mean? It's that you're not, if you're not in a supportive listening frame of mind, there could be a blow up and you're going to question it, when if you had been supportive and listening, you could have been the leader and redirected and said, oh, not that way, let's try this way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, in the moment the horse questions their safety, if you redirect the mind, sometimes you just bypass the entire problem because
Yes.
your aid is saying, don't look over there, you're not going to like it. Let's think about this over here. That's a really supportive aid, right? That isn't necessarily having to control the horse's movement. You're not having the horse doesn't have to be in a frame or not in a frame. You're not trying to tell them specifically what to do, but you're saying, yeah, let's not do that. I'm pretty sure that's only going to get you spun up. Let's go somewhere else.
Redirect.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that would be support. And the same
Yes.
thing, if we're giving a supportive rein aid, the best way I can describe it is if we go back to that numbering system. So let's say now as a rider, I've gotten really good at mastering how to maintain what I call a 5 feel on a huge variety of rein lengths in motion. So I'm not controlling the position of my horse's head and neck. I'm just keeping the connection through the reins, no matter where they put their head and neck. So that is how
Right.
I know the difference between support and control. So if my rein aids, if my intention is to frame the horse's head and neck, you're already in the land of control more than support because you're
Yes.
telling the horse how to use and where to put the head and neck. And the odds of us being accurate and useful and in optimal use of the head and neck are pretty slim. Like
Right.
winning the lottery kind of slim, you know, very slim chances.
I keep buying my ticket.
I know. So if we feel the use of the head and neck through our rein contact, now when we go to give support, so let's take a left-right issue. On a left-right imbalance, suddenly the right rein goes from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the left rein is going to increase 5, 6, 7, 8. That's how we
Right.
know the spine is no longer laterally balanced. We feel one rein decreases in force and the other rein increases in force. If we don't alter our rein lengths in that moment, we resist on the heavy rein because that's where the energy is going.
Right.
And then the horse has to figure out how to make that mechanical adjustment. And we know that they did when the left rein goes 6-5 or 7-6-5 and the right rein fills back up 3-4-5. So the feel of a 5 and a 5 on each rein tells us that the horse has stabilized the mechanical functions of lateral bending and rotation. If they lose that stability in the functions of lateral bending or rotation, one rein is going to have less force and the other one is going to have more. So that's the kind of information we need to know to be able to guide our horse into a better mechanical use. So then you're going to resist the aid. You can't give an aid on a zero contact. There's no connection. So if the horse
Right.
reduces the force on the right rein, the only aid we can give would be on the left rein. So what we're saying by resisting on the left rein is don't shift your body over this way. So we create a resistance for the body shifting towards the left rein until the horse figures out, let me shift back towards the right. And that's when the right rein will fill up, the force will increase again, and the left rein will go back to the contact. So that's
Yeah.
more advanced. That's why if we don't,
Yes, I would
if
say
we're
so.
still picking up the reins, right? If we're still picking up the reins to prevent the fall forward, pick up the front end, frame the head and neck, we're trying to control through the reins, which means we can't really, what I would call authentically support changes in the horse's balance. And so let's talk
Yeah,
about two. Sorry, go ahead. I
it
jump in
kind of
too fast.
it kind of reminds me, and I don't know why this keeps coming up in my head. It just frustrates me when I hear someone say it's snowing outside and 20 below and the winds are blowing, to say to anybody, don't forget your jacket. It's cold outside. It's like, I think I think that get that. We don't have to try to control that. Does that make sense? It reminds me of that total thought that if I do it ABC, everything will be just fine.
Yeah. Well, and
Instead
that
of saying, well, if you go outside without your coat, I'm
I'm
sure you'll
sure you'll
figure it
learn.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That to me has much more power. I don't know. I see it with the relationships with my horses. Letting them be part of the conversation
Letting them have the
is,
experience. Yeah. In
yes,
order to learn.
in
Yeah.
order to
And
learn, and then maybe that error won't happen again.
yeah. And if I look back in my career, coming from sort of the show world, venturing into natural horsemanship, It couldn't have been more opposite. So in the show
Wow.
world, it was like we're taught to control everything, all of the horse's
Right.
movement, right? And then it was kind of like a pendulum swing that really went through our whole horse industry, where natural horsemanship gained a lot of popularity because suddenly you were given the freedom to not control anything and let
Right.
the horse figure it out. And that had a lot of appeal to me at the time because I went, wow, I have to look at any of my own fear issues that were related to the control, or letting the horse figure things out woke me up to the fact that horses have this incredible intelligence. They can think, they can make decisions. They either choose to work with you or they don't. But there's this whole world of horse opinion that was opened up to me because natural horsemanship, one of the first things is sort of just give up all control. That's where
Right.
I had some pretty hairy passenger rides. It was like, okay, that's kind of the cowboy way. You learn to ride by the seat of your pants, was the theory. And it's a
Right.
sink or swim sort of figure it out deal. So over time, I realized too that doing nothing doesn't really help horses either because
I
they're
agree completely.
it's not fair. Once you put a live weight and mass on a horse, you can't expect the horse to just figure out how to best use their body, even with a perfect rider, without giving them some guidance. I go, it's not that they're not intelligence, that we all need guidance and support in order to learn something new or something that takes us beyond our instinct, right? So if
And
we
that there's
never,
many ways to get there. There isn't
yeah,
just one way. And to allow that conversation between you and your horse to explore, I think is huge.
absolutely. And so a lot of times in competitive riding, the sort of unspoken message is if you don't control the way your horse will move badly. And then in sort of the natural horsemanship venue, don't control anything, let your horse figure it out.
Mhm.
And I go, there is a middle way. And the middle way is control when you have to
Mhm.
and try to support as your main method of teaching, guiding a horse
Mhm.
towards what, you know, optimal use of the mechanics or optimal balance is a higher coordination than nature ever intended for a horse or a
Right.
rider. So we all figure out how to function, but all of the problems we have are because we figured out a way to find stability that wasn't necessarily the most efficient or best use of our body. So, like training for optimal balance for me or optimal posture, your business is about guiding people and horses to the most efficient use of the mechanics, a higher level of
Yeah.
balance than we could ever figure out instinctually. And we can't expect our horses to figure out without support and guidance. So we can't, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing.
Right. And I think being a good leader, we have to also listen to the opinion of whoever we're working with. That,
Yeah,
the horse might have a better idea,
yes. Or the
and to
rider.
listen to that and say, okay, well, let's try that and see if we get where we need to go.
Yes. Yes. And so that experience of improving our mechanical function or the horse's mechanical function, even as a teacher in my own evolution as sort of a trainer and teacher of horse training, I fell into this typical human pitfall of trying to describe the feeling through my own experience. And I go,
Welcome
that
to my
doesn't
world.
work, right? I had to relearn that everybody's experience has a unique description.
Yes,
And
to
so
them.
now I ask for the description. that is unique to that person, just like I would ask the horse. The horse will tell me through their behavior and their energy and their cooperation or lack thereof and behavior, whether or not they feel better from what I'm asking them to do or they feel more challenged. And
Right.
so support for a horse is sort of navigating that level of challenge to make an improvement without pushing it so far that the horse goes, this sucks, I'm getting defensive, I'm out of
I'm
here.
leaving now.
Yeah. Or I'm shutting
I'm out of
down.
here.
Yeah. So we don't need 100% control, but we do have to really look at support. And then I have to kind of get into the weeds with people and go, what does support mean to you? And try to
Exactly.
decipher between, is it control or is it support? Because
Right.
support allows discovery. It has to allow some flexibility in the process because mistakes will be made in the process of learning.
And I'm sure you hear it all the time too from riders. Is this right? Am I doing it right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that black and white, right or wrong, um, just really doesn't exist
yeah. And
in the
that's
support
another,
phase. Yeah.
it's another sort of human instinct that I have to kind of peel back layers of sometimes is I'll just ask somebody, what do you feel? And the human brain can't answer that simple of a question most often. So the answer goes something like, um, I feel him more engaged. And I go,
Interesting.
or I feel, what do I want to say? I feel he's more square, or I feel well, that would actually be a description. But I want to say something like, I feel he's more, um, or I don't feel anything.
I hear that a lot.
Right? Or what I'm trying to get at is that what a person is actually feeling rapidly gets translated into the picture that they want to see or the picture that they think they're seeing. And I have to kind of pull them back and go, not the picture, the feeling.
Right. The factual kinesthetics of it all.
Yeah. And then where do you feel that in your body? Right? And people will sometimes feel it in the seat, sometimes in the legs, sometimes in the middle, sometimes at an extremity. But it's like that's our way of figuring out better and better coordination in our own body. And so my words with a human have to support, but I can't give them my experience and I can't control how they go through their unique process of discovery.
Exactly.
And the horses taught me that because some horses just won't have it,
I
right?
have one like that.
Yeah.
It almost has to be her suggestion. I can be, well, what about this? And she makes the decision whether we're doing that or not.
Yeah.
And it's very subtle. I mean, it's not like this big grandiose decision process. It's a very subtle kinesthetic thing, conversation that's going on.
Well, if we catch it at a subtle level, otherwise horses have a way of making it more and more obvious to us. If we miss the subtle version, then I hear all of a sudden my horse blew up. So,
Yeah,
but there's a famous
it's
saying in with horses that with geldings you can make them do what you want. With stallions, you have to ask them to do what you want. And with mares, you have to send an invitation and wait for a reply. So when
yes.
you said her, I was like, oh, yeah, her. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's really what stallions and mares are showing us because they're intact. They're just more horse with the hormones intact,
Hmm.
that how horses want to be treated. They love the support if it's not control. And the
Right.
way they know the difference is through the feel of our aids and the feel of our contact and our energy and
And
our attitudes.
the timing, I think. Timing and feel, I think you talk about a lot.
Yeah, because once we have
And you,
our independent balance, it changes the timing and the feel of all of our aids and all of our contacts.
yes. And I think that's key. We have to have internal balance and coordination to help the horse, to be supportive, because otherwise we're controlling for our own balance.
Yeah. And on a certain level, especially if somebody's horse scares the owner, sometimes that control, the self-control has to start with the human.
Oh, I
Before
totally agree with that. Yeah.
before we can even support any changes for that the horse needs to make, or even authentically control a dangerous situation with the horse, we have to have the ability to control our own mental focus and the ability to know how to get back to a calm state, to self-control our emotional state. And if
Yes.
we don't have self-control emotionally, mentally, and also physically as a rider, then we're really not even quite qualified yet to support a horse's journey or development
Right.
because that interplay of instincts is just not going to go well. Like
Right.
the human instinct is designed by nature to absolutely clash with the horse instinct.
It's the predator prey thing. It's
Yeah.
guttural.
Yeah. So if we're still losing our cool, if we can't stay calm and if we can't stay focused and if we can't stay in physical self-carriage and balance from our torso again, not through our limbs, then it's very
Right.
difficult to support a horse because we're constantly sort of in an interplay, a counterbalance where the horse is out of balance, we're out of balance, but because we're leveraged on each other, we found some stability. And I go, stability
Yeah.
is very different than balance. You can
Yes.
you can find stability and be very dysfunctional, right? So,
Yes.
and we see it all the time. But if you're in balance, you're also stable, but you can find stability completely out of balance too.
Yes. I
Yeah.
agree.
And if you're finding stability out of balance, that shift from controlling to supporting is going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find the only place I can genuinely support a horse's development and learning is if I'm starting at that place where I'm in balance mentally, emotionally, physically. And if I get triggered out of
Yeah, and I
that,
think you've said it. I know I've heard it from you is the don't be the owner when you go to ride, be the trainer. Don't, you kind of have to make that separation of emotional
yeah,
context for the human.
it's a little bit like why spouses shouldn't be the trainer of their spouse, right? Or parents shouldn't be teaching
I
the
had a hard
children.
time teaching my daughter to ride. That was very difficult.
Yeah, it's too much connection. It's too involved. So if
Yeah.
we go to our horse pretending our horse belongs to somebody else, it's kind of like how we treat other people's kids differently than our own kids. Better or worse doesn't matter,
Hmm.
but it's just there's that layer of separation, and it's a lot of times, even if the wife rides or the mother rides, they'll bring their kid to the instructor or their spouse to the instructor because they know how difficult it is to work with somebody that you're that intimate with. And it's true
Yes.
with our own horses, right? So we have to pretend it's somebody else's horse when we go to ride, and whatever they do just feels less personal. We don't take
Yeah,
offense as easily. And
exactly.
yeah, it's just a way to get out of our habits.
Yes.
But what do you find in people's bodies? Like in your work, can you tell well, I know you can tell when somebody has sort of found stability through dysfunction, but as they're going through the process of changing that, Where would you say that line is between control and support? Either in you helping them or in them shifting? Because the more dysfunctional we are,
Mm.
even if we're stable, I find that goes hand in hand with the need to control others.
It's a level of tension in the body that it leans it more towards control. If I have to use a ton of contraction to find stability, then I'm, like you said, that's not balance, because balance is a movable thing. It's kind of like when I put hands on somebody, and if they're in a controlling state, I can feel the rigidity and the separate parts.
Mm.
When they start moving more towards balance, there's a fluidity of movement and availability in the body to adapt and move.
Yeah, because we could also say balance is the most efficient use of the body mechanic, but it's
Mhm.
not the only
Yes,
use of the body mechanic.
exactly.
Yeah. And I find it kind of what you're saying, even energetically, that sort of over controlling of the self or the need to control others goes hand in hand with dysfunction and over sort of using the body in an inefficient way or an imbalanced way.
Right,
And as people make changes in their balance as a rider, physical changes, it's like they also have this emotional state of go with the flow. So not only is it sort of more of a flowing, freer moving body, but it's like the mind goes with it. They're not so disturbed or disrupted emotionally
right,
by what the horse does or doesn't do, cooperates or doesn't cooperate. They can go with the flow because they're in balance. All of a sudden, this
right,
old behavior isn't nearly the big deal it used to be. It's like,
right.
okay,
It
we need
doesn't
to,
have, you don't have to have control.
it's just not as overwhelming.
Yeah,
And when we get to that place ourselves, that's when the guidance or direction we're giving would fall more into the category I would call support. Because,
yes,
like you said, there's a flow to it, there's a openness or availability of options.
yes.
And that's where we become better guides rather than the doing. And
The
that
doers.
that need to control, it can be more directed at the self than the horse, but either way, it's not really serving getting either a
The
horse or a
relationship at
rider
all.
towards balance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we just need to shut up and listen.
Yeah. Sometimes even if I talk to people and I'll describe something will come up and I'll say, well, have you ever thought of trying a passenger lesson or just going to the buckle on your reins and finding your torso balance? Some people look at that with fear, like they can't even
Fear. Oh,
imagine.
yeah. That's like, you want what?
Yeah, that's just crazy talk. That is crazy talk, lady. What do you mean? Do nothing and be passive and hope my horse doesn't kill me? And I go, no, there's lots
I
of
even
layers,
had I had a client who's an upper level dressage rider say, we were taught to never do that.
Yeah, and the thought behind it is it's bad for the horse. And I go,
Right,
if you took it to the extreme, that's what I did see in natural horsemanship, is if you're going to allow the
right,
horse to figure out everything, they're not going to do a great job. That your expectations are too high. They need support, just like all of us need support. So that's the
right.
extreme. But the other extreme is never let go, never make allow the horse to make a decision or a mistake because that's bad. And I go, there is a
Yep.
place
uh,
in the middle.
There is a place in the middle, and it's not static.
Yeah, yeah, it's an ever
It's a
changing.
moving thing.
Yes, yes. So anything you want to kind of land with, it's a little bit of a general topic, but I hope you guys understand the message we're trying to convey is basically if you need control, then you don't have support. When you don't need to
Right. You can't
control
do
the
both.
horse, yeah, then you can support the horse. Those two things don't go together. Like,
Yes.
but they get mixed up all the time. But there's a definite difference
Yes.
between control and support. And we feel it. We feel it when some of our
Hmm.
friends or loved ones are trying to control us. It doesn't feel good, even if we can't quite put our finger on it. And when somebody is supporting us, that's a very different feeling. That's a different
Yes.
experience. And we love the people who support us, and we sort of avoid the people who try to control us.
Most of
Eh,
us do. I
Yeah.
do.
I go, it's a difference between the teacher we loved and the teachers we hated, or the boss we love and the
Yep.
boss we hated.
Hmm.
That's because none of us like to feel controlled, but all of us like to feel
Exactly.
supported. Yeah, and it's not a big leap for us to put ourselves in our horse's shoes or kind of look at it through their perspective. If we do nothing, that total lack of support isn't a good feeling either.
No.
Yeah, you're just out on your own there. Figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. And then they may not use very healthy ways to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Anything you want to add?
Nope, that sounds good.
Wrap it up?
Wrap it
Yeah.
up.
Okay, so I think we'll call this the control and support episode because that's mostly what we talked about. I
Hmm.
think we figure it out very quickly as riders when we can give up the reins, when we can unclench our fingers. When we can
Yeah,
think of that pinky connection like we talked about in the last podcast. I think we have to be able to let go and feel safe doing it before any of our aids actually could work in a supportive way.
I agree. You have to be able to give it up first and then go back.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So thanks everybody for joining us once again for the Horse Geeks podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And please like, share, subscribe, comment. All of that really helps. If you like this podcast, then help us with the algorithms and help us get it out there. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.